13 African nations just said no to Donald Trump, and folks, the world is definitely watching, probably with a bucket of popcorn. What exactly was on the table? What kind of deal, art of the deal style, did he offer? More importantly, why did these diverse, powerful nations collectively decide to swipe left? And what does this chorus of rejections mean for the future of U.S. Africa relations? A relationship that's always been, let's say, complicated? Stick around, because we are about to unpack all of it, and trust me, it's a story you need to hear. But hold on, before we dive headfirst into this geopolitical saga, if you're new here, or if you just love staying ahead of the curve, make sure to subscribe to Voyage Pulse. We're all about these in-depth analyses on global affairs, the kind that makes you the smartest person at the dinner table. Go on, hit that bell icon too, so you never miss an update. You wouldn't want to miss us explaining why suddenly everyone's paying attention to Africa's diplomatic mic drops now, would you? It's going to be quite the journey, and you'll want a front row seat for this one. So picture this. Early 2025. President Donald Trump, back in the global spotlight, extends a series of offers to several African nations. The stated aim? Oh, you know, the usual. Strengthening U.S. influence, fostering partnerships, the kind of language that sounds good on a press release. However, in a rather unprecedented move, 13 of these countries looked at the proposals, consulted amongst themselves, and essentially said, thanks, but no thanks. They stood their ground, rejecting these overtures. Today we're not just listing names, we're going to explore each case, each story of defiance and strategic thinking. Let's get into it. Let's talk about South Africa. President Trump had some unique takes on South African internal affairs, specifically the large-scale killing of farmers. When his administration came knocking again in 2025, President Cyril Ramaphosa was ready with a very polite but very firm, "Nah, we're good." He took the opportunity to very publicly refute Trump's alarmist claims. He emphasized that South Africa's land reform process is being handled legally through parliamentary processes and aims to address historical injustices. South Africa would not be pressured into abandoning its sovereign right to address its own historical legacies. It was South Africa saying, "We understand our problems better than you do, and we will solve them our way." Next, Nigeria, a significant economic player with a robust relationship with the U.S. When the U.S. proposed new trade terms in 2025, Nigeria responded directly, pushing back on tariffs. Nigeria emphasized commitment to international trade laws, suggesting disputes go through the World Trade Organization. They demanded a level playing field and fair trade, not just deals benefiting one party. This stance resonated across Africa, underscoring a growing confidence to challenge economic powers and demand respect in trade. Let's move to Kenya, known for its vibrant democracy. Kenya's rejection of overtures was intertwined with concerns about U.S. commitment to human rights. The Kenyan government grew uneasy about U.S. silence on human rights concerns. Moral authority and consistent support from international partners like the U.S. are crucial. The strain had been building, with reports flagging concerns. The rejection was a statement that partnerships must be built on shared values, not just interests. This highlights the dilemma for African nations, balancing powerful allies with upholding democratic principles. This was Kenya drawing a line in the sand, prioritizing its long-term democratic health. Let's venture into the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a country blessed with immense natural wealth. But it's also cursed with a long history of conflict and exploitation, often fueled by external interests. So when the Trump administration offered ceasefire calls linked to mineral deals, skepticism in Kinshasa was high. The DRC has learned that not all helping hands are truly helpful. Any deal would be scrutinized for its underlying motives and potential long-term consequences for the nation's sovereignty. The DRC is saying, we're open for business, but not for exploitation. Let's talk about Lesotho, a small mountainous nation completely surrounded by South Africa. You might remember a comment attributed to President Trump that rhymed with spit-hole countries. Imagine that same administration reaching out to Lesotho with offers of partnership in 2025. The outrage in Lesotho following that remark was palpable. So, for Lesotho, a proud sovereign nation, it's not hard to imagine their response being a swift and unequivocal rejection. It's like someone insults your entire family, then shows up at your door asking to borrow sugar. Lesotho's rejection would have been a powerful statement that words matter, and that a nation's size does not diminish its right to be treated with respect on the international stage. Now let's turn our attention to Zimbabwe. A country that has had a, shall we say, few decades dealing with economic challenges, political transitions, and a somewhat strained relationship with the West, including the U.S., often involving sanctions. So when the Trump administration came with its 2025 proposals, Zimbabwe's response was quite interesting, and perhaps a bit unexpected on the surface. They actually made a concession. They moved to scrap tariffs on U.S. goods. A goodwill gesture, perhaps, or a pragmatic move? But hold on, because this didn't mean they were suddenly best friends. This move to scrap tariffs on U.S. goods might seem like an olive branch, an attempt to improve relations or curry favor. And in part, it could be interpreted as Zimbabwe trying to open up its economy and signal a willingness to engage. However, beneath this gesture, a deep-seated skepticism about U.S. intentions, particularly those of a Trump administration, would undoubtedly remain. Zimbabwe has a long history of feeling targeted by U.S. foreign policy, especially concerning sanctions and criticisms of its governance. One tariff adjustment doesn't erase decades of complex history. The leadership in Harare would be acutely aware of the America First doctrine. While welcoming any move that could potentially boost their struggling economy, they would also be wary of strings attached or the potential for any agreement to be lopsided. They'd be thinking, okay, we'll lower these tariffs, show we're willing to play ball. But what's the catch? What do you want? And is this a genuine partnership or just another attempt to exert influence? It's like when a cat suddenly starts being nice to you. You appreciate it, but you're also wondering what it's plotting. So, while the tariff scrap was a notable development, Zimbabwe's overall stance would likely still be one of cautious engagement, at best, and outright rejection of any broader, potentially compromising U.S. overtures. They would be looking for tangible, long-term benefits and a genuine shift in the U.S. approach, one that respects their sovereignty and supports their national development agenda without imposing external political conditions too heavily. The skepticism, born from years of sanctions and perceived hostility, wouldn't just evaporate overnight. It's a case of actions speak louder than words, and even then, we're going to need to see a consistent pattern of positive actions. Let's journey to Ethiopia, a nation navigating immense internal challenges. Ethiopia's response to the U.S. proposals was cautious, rooted in a perceived lack of genuine support. The conflict in the Tigray region strained international relations. Ethiopia seeks tangible evidence of commitment to its long-term stability and development priorities. They need partners for the long haul. Ethiopia desires partnerships built on trust and mutual respect, supporting Ethiopian-led initiatives. It's a call for empathetic engagement, acknowledging the country's resilience. Let's go to Ghana, a beacon of democracy in West Africa. Ghana values African dignity, dating back to Kwame Nkrumah. Faced with Trump's proposals, Ghana's response would be rooted in mutual respect. Any partnership must be one of equals. Ghana isn't looking for handouts. The America First policy would be a concern. Rejection would stem from insisting on dignity in international relations. Collaboration is welcome, but it must come with respect. Sovereignty and dignity are non-negotiable. Let's look at Senegal, prized for its democratic stability. Senegal values consistency and long-term strategic alliances. Senegal's leadership would approach unpredictable policy shifts with apprehension, preferring a steady hand. Senegal needs to make long-term plans for development, security, and economic growth. Senegal would be looking for reassurance that new agreements wouldn't be subject to a volatile political climate. The preference in Dakar would be for stable alliances oriented towards mutual growth. They would likely compare the U.S. offer against existing partnerships who might offer a more consistent and predictable engagement. This is about pragmatism and the need for dependable international relationships. Let's travel south now to Namibia, a nation with a relatively young history as an independent state, having emerged from a long struggle against apartheid South African rule. This history has instilled in Namibia a fierce commitment to its sovereignty and a deep-seated wariness of any external influence that might seek to undermine it. So when the Trump administration presented its 2025 offers, any proposal that even hinted at compromising Namibian autonomy would have been met with a very firm and principled rejection. They didn't fight for freedom just to seed it in a deal. Namibia's leadership would meticulously scrutinize any U.S. offer, not just for its economic benefits, but for its potential impact on their national sovereignty and their ability to make independent policy decisions. They would be particularly sensitive to any clauses that could be interpreted as interference in their internal affairs, or that would lock them into agreements disproportionately benefiting U.S. interests. Having experienced colonial domination, Namibians are acutely aware of the dangers of unequal partnerships and resource exploitation disguised as aid or investment. It's a case of once bitten, twice shy, but on a national scale. The call from Windhoek would be for truly equitable partnerships, collaborations where both parties benefit fairly, where Namibian priorities are respected, and where the nation's developmental agenda is supported, not dictated. They would reject any offer that felt like a neo-colonial arrangement, where Namibia's resources were to be leveraged primarily for U.S. gain, without sustainable benefits for the Namibian people. It's about ensuring that any international engagement strengthens Namibia, rather than creating new forms of dependency. Therefore, Namibia's no to Trump's proposals would be a clear assertion of its sovereignty-first principle. It would signal that while Namibia is open to cooperation, it will not compromise its independence or accept deals that are not genuinely reciprocal. It's a message that Namibia values its autonomy above all, and will only enter partnerships that honor this fundamental tenet. They are saying, our independence is not for sale, and our partnerships must reflect our sovereign equality. Botswana is hailed as a model of good governance and democracy in Africa. Botswana has built its success on strong institutions and respect for the rule of law. If they perceived inconsistency between U.S. rhetoric about democracy and its practice, it would lead to a cautious stance. If the U.S. administration was seen as undermining democratic norms, it would create a credibility problem. Botswana would be wary of aligning too closely with an administration whose actions contradict democratic values. It's about being pro-Botswana's values and maintaining its reputation as a principled actor. They would likely prefer to engage with partners who demonstrate a clear commitment to democratic principles. Mozambique, rich in natural resources but facing security and climate challenges, prioritizes regional partnerships. Skepticism towards U.S. offers, especially from an America-first approach, is high. They need long-term predictable support for infrastructure, poverty reduction, and peace building. Offers must align with national priorities, focusing on genuine sustainable partnerships, building resilience within the region. Finally, let's turn to Tanzania, a country with a strong tradition of self-reliance rooted in the philosophy of Ujamaa, championed by its founding president, Julius Nyerere. While Tanzania has opened up its economy and engages with global partners, this underlying principle of self-determination and a certain wariness of external influences, particularly those perceived as misaligned with its national interests or values, remains a significant factor in its foreign policy. So, when the Trump administration presented its 2025 proposals, Tanzania's response would be filtered through this lens of cautious engagement and a preference for homegrown solutions. Tanzania has historically been careful about becoming overly dependent on any single external power or bloc. It values its policy space and its ability to chart its own development path. An administration like Trump's, known for its assertive and sometimes unilateral approach to international relations, might be viewed with particular suspicion in Dar es Salaam. They would be concerned about potential pressures to conform to U.S. policy preferences or to adopt models that don't fit Tanzania's unique socio-economic context. It's the spirit of thanks, but we prefer to do it our way, at our own pace. The emphasis on self-reliance doesn't mean isolation, but it does mean that Tanzania would critically assess any offer for its potential to genuinely empower the nation, rather than create new dependencies or serve external agendas. They would be wary of deals that come with extensive conditionalities, or that seem to prioritize foreign corporate interests over the needs of ordinary Tanzanians. There's a strong sense that external partnerships should complement, not dictate, national development efforts. It's like accepting help to build your house, but you still want to be the architect and make sure it's built to your specifications. Therefore, Tanzania's rejection of Trump's 2025 offers would likely be a manifestation of its long-standing commitment to self-reliance and its cautious approach to external influences that might not fully align with its national ethos. It would be a signal that Tanzania prefers partnerships that respect its sovereignty, support its own development vision, and operate on a basis of mutual respect and non-interference. It's a quiet but firm assertion of its right to define its own destiny, free from undue external pressure, reflecting a deep-seated belief in the capacity of Tanzanians to build their own future. So what do all these rejections, these 13 no's to the Trump administration's 2025 proposals really tell us? Well, They signal a significant and frankly overdue shift in Africa's global engagements. It's not just about one U.S. president or one set of offers. It's about a continent increasingly asserting its autonomy, with growing partnerships with a diverse array of nations, think China, Russia, countries in the EU, and increasingly robust intra-African trade and collaboration. African countries are actively redefining their international relationships. They are diversifying their options and making choices based on their own strategic interests, not just historical allegiances or external pressures. The message coming from these 13 nations, and indeed from many others across the continent, is crystal clear. Africa is not a pawn in some global geopolitical chess game. It's not a monolith, and its nations are tired of being treated as such. They are seeking partnerships, yes, but partnerships built on a foundation of mutual respect, genuine equity, and true collaboration. They want to be co-authors of their destiny, not just recipients of aid or subjects of foreign policy. As the world watches, and it watching, one thing is absolutely certain: Africa's collective voice, its agency, is stronger and more assertive than ever before. This is a continent on the move, on its own terms. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive with us here on Voyage Pulse. If you found this analysis insightful, and if it gave you a new perspective on these crucial developments, please do subscribe for more. We're committed to bringing you stories that matter from around the globe. And we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you make of these rejections? What does it signal to you about the future of Africa and its place in the world? Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep questioning.